Hello and welcome to the Green Voice podcast, where you can get the dirt on sustainability in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm your host, Grant Ervin with S&B USA. Today I have with me here Adam Haas. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing good, yeah.
It's exciting to have you. We're located here on site at the Phipps Center for Sustainable Landscapes. Did I get that correct?
You did.
It's always a pleasure to come here, and it's funny when you walk up and you just get this sense of sustainability when you're here on the campus. Whether it's coming from like the entrance, from the park side, but I almost think it's better coming from the rear because you get to see all the things that are happening behind the scenes here. So we're super excited to get to talk to you and to learn about your role, but also learn about some of the exciting things that are happening here at Phipps.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, maybe we start. Tell us a little bit about Adam and your position and how you came to Phipps. I mean, there's a lot to learn here.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's funny. I have a job title that if you're at a party, say, "What do you do?"
Right.
I'd say, "Oh, I'm an interpretive manager."
Right.
And immediately, you can tell if they want to talk to you because they go, "Oh, cool," walk away.
Right.
Having no idea, or they're like, "Oh, well, you have to."
Let me
explain
grab
it
a
to
beer.
everybody. Yeah. Yeah. So interpretation in the museum context is it's the same as interpretation for a language, right? If you're an interpreter, you take a language and make it understandable to someone else. Mm-hmm. In the museum context, that's what people that do interpretation do. But instead of taking words and helping them make sense, you take the collection and help the collection make sense to the visitors. So if you're doing interpretation at an art museum and you have the Mona Lisa, it's cool to look at it,
right,
but you can help people engage with it and make meaning out of it for themselves and that type of thing. Our collection, we're a museum, it's just our collection's alive. So our plants and our buildings too. We talk about the buildings as being part of Phipps and living buildings. And so my job is when someone comes to Phipps, we want them to have a meaningful experience. And my job is to help that happen. It's not so much us telling you what's important or you should know this or you should know this parts of this plant, but here's this experience. We want you to come and we want you to make your own meaning.
Wow. Tell me about your pathway. I mean, this is like, you don't become an interpretive manager overnight. I'm going to assume,
you're not a kid on the playground.
Yeah, I want to be an interpretive
manager. I really
want
to do interpretation.
What's the pathway?
Yeah. For me, it was a little circuitous. I worked in a bunch of things. Worked in IT, worked in hospitality, and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and was really interested in education.
Okay.
Thought I wanted to be a teacher, but didn't love the formal setting as much. I was
the classroom
setting?
Yeah,
the classroom setting. I was more interested in informal education, and ended up, I always loved museums. Grew up a big museum nerd, coming here, the Carnegie.
Pittsburgh guy?
Pittsburgh guy, originally Westmoreland County.
Okay, yeah.
But the area, but then lived all over the place and would always end up in museums. And found a graduate school program where you got a Master of Arts in Teaching, but with a focus in museum education.
Interesting.
That was at GW, so it was in DC,
George
which
Washington.
is which is all the museums.
Right. If there's going to be an interpretive program, it's going to be there.
You can't throw a stone and not hit a museum there. So ended up getting my graduate degree. Worked at the United States Botanic Garden.
Okay.
Always cared about nature and the environment. Kind of all came together. Phipps had a job opening, and I thought,
back home.
I'm coming back to Pittsburgh.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't part of the plan, but I'm thrilled it happened.
It's interesting, like interpretive management. Could you go either direction in terms of, an internal museum where you're doing art collections or artifacts? You just chose the nature path?
Yeah, that's right. My class had, art history people.
Okay.
Historic houses, science centers. It was just the museum context, and this happens to be the one that I ended up in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about the program, the interpretive program here.
Yeah, so basically interpretation is anything that engages with the guests. So the big thing people think of when you think of interpretation is signage.
Okay.
You go to a museum and there's signs talking about things. And really, like a role like mine got started because back in the day, when museums first opened, they weren't really for everybody. They were sort of for the elite, cabinets of curiosity. And
so there's a history component to this as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then as it goes on and more people, it was real, museums should be for the people.
Right.
And so you have, these public institutions, but you have the person, the curator, who has a PhD in medieval tapestries or something, and they're writing the labels with this really esoteric knowledge. And a guy off the street, lady off the street's coming in. That
doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. And so they got away from having the curator kind of this didactic model of curator tells you what's important.
Okay.
To you have the curator who has all the knowledge, you have the guest, and then someone like me's in the middle, the liaison to kind of
interpreter.
Help interpret that connection there.
Now, what's it look like for you? I mean, in terms of you have to be able to understand your audience, but you also have to be able to understand some of this complex, or as you said, esoteric content.
Yeah.
What's that balance like?
Yeah, it's fun for me. I've never been in a job this long because I usually get bored, but you don't get bored because like talking about
there's no shortage of plants.
Yeah, no shortage of plants, and there's so much I don't know.
Right.
So, but even too, so we're in the Center for Sustainable Landscapes, and all the green buildings back here and all those processes. They're fascinating, but I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, so a lot of really smart people, a lot smarter than me, just take the time to help me understand it so that I can put it in terms for people like me to understand. So it's a lot of learning on my part to be able to help people that come in here learn.
In terms of understanding the questions or the way that the audience views the material, or like understanding that content?
Both. So you have to understand the content, but like you said, that's exactly right. You have to understand the audience coming in. And so to that end, we do visitor surveys, evaluations to figure out, well, why are people coming to Phipps? And if our goal is to connect them to nature, the more we know about why they're coming and what they want to see and what they're enjoying, the better we can tailor that to make sure that we're helping facilitate that.
That's an interesting thing to kind of break down a little bit. I've been in the sustainability space one form or another really my entire career, and that's always, we joked about it in the beginning, it's always one of the challenges to explain what you do. It's my mom, I always use her as like the barometer, maybe you do too. And I always feel like it would have been a lot easier if I was a dentist or or a school teacher, something that she understands and connects with. She's always like, well, he does this Sustana stuff, or ESG, something. And so there's always those complexities. What are some of the ways that you have found to better connect with the audience and translate some of those issues that are, and sometimes not sometimes, a lot of times esoteric?
No, it's a great question, and something that I think in my time here has evolved a lot. So when I started, this building was just opening up. So this building opened up, 10 years ago, something like that. And my position was created because we knew this space was coming. And so when it first started, we were all so jazzed about this building, and wow, how many kilowatt hours it produces, and wow, this is how the rainwater system works. And that's still really cool.
Right.
But I think at least when I started, I was so fascinated by how it worked. That's what I wanted people to know. I wanted people to understand, hey, the water comes down here, it goes through this system, and then it's clean. And that's still part of the story, but over the past decade, the way we talk about it, the way we write signs about it, the way we engage docents to talk to the public is the nitty gritty. If people are interested in it, that's great, but it's the bigger picture of this idea that sustainability is it's not about nature and preserving nature. It's about understanding that we are part of nature.
We're all connected.
We are connected, and we're part of this ecosystem, and so this, so much of what's going on now, Phipps would argue, I think, is, biodiversity loss of habitat, climate change.
Right.
It's because we've lost that feeling that we're part of this bigger system.
That humans have lost their connection with nature, or their sense of connectivity to
That's
nature.
right. That's exactly right. And so what we think it's more effective when we talk about sustainability and get people to think about this stuff and maybe even change behaviors. It's not, here's a list of, turn the water off and you brush your teeth.
The checklist.
Yeah, make sure you recycle. Those are minor symptoms to the systemic problem that once you have this mindset that, wow, like my health is predicated on the health of the natural world because I am the natural world, the natural world's me. Once you are thinking like that, all those decisions start to shift, and you don't have to tell someone, use reusable bags. It's just your understanding shifts, and it's, I hate to use a buzzword, but it's a paradigm shift. To understanding that, if this whole system isn't healthy, my family's not going to be healthy.
What do you think has led us away from that connectivity? Like, I mean, that's a deep question, but like,
Yeah.
you know, this idea.
I lay up at night thinking about this stuff, so it's true. It's a good question.
Because, you know, because it impacts your day to day, right? Like, why have people lost that connectivity to nature and not just the natural environment, but the built environment too?
Right.
And how they kind of intersect. Like, I mean, what's some of your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that you know, we
You
think
look well
about.
rested, so you didn't think about it last night.
No, not
like,
last night. No, that's like a Monday night kind of question to think about. So I think it's a few things, and I think Phipps is kind of an interesting example of our history. Sort of tells the tale a little bit of Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
So Henry Phipps,
Yep.
business partner Andrew Carnegie, so Carnegie Steel, second largest shareholder, you know, fabulously wealthy. And we all know what Pittsburgh was like during the Industrial Revolution.
This was created as a respite from that.
This was a respite. And the irony here, and the one we have to grapple with, we don't want to hide, but we're named for this guy who gave us this money, which was great, to create this respite, a place of inspiration and pleasure and instruction. But he had all this money to build this because of the steel industry, which was why you had to put nature inside to go see plants because the air outside was so bad.
Right.
And so there's this tension.
Paradox.
Yeah, there's this paradox there that we're cognizant of, and we have to, you know, that's our heritage, and we have to recognize that and talk about it and understand. So, and I think, you know, Phipps at the time it was built was considered, you know, this is the best kind of design we can do. We can conquer Mother Nature, right? We can dig more coal and burn it and make steel, and we can build
Everything's
America
gonna be okay.
and man's dominion over nature, right? And that was considered the design, you know, paradigm. That was the best you could do. And it's still a beautiful building. I mean, it's on the Register of Historic Places. It's why people come here, because it's beautiful, it makes you feel good.
And the original building too is also very functional in that regard. Like the design of that building, I mean, things have evolved, and we'll talk about the center here, but like it works.
Yeah.
You know, like in terms of maintaining that indoor component of nature, bringing the outdoors indoors.
It does, but it also, if you think about it, Palm Court, and like the whole thing was built to grow stuff that doesn't grow around here.
Not native species.
Not native species. So you want to see palm trees in the deciduous, you know, where in a temperate climate like Pittsburgh. And it's all single pane glass, which is inefficient. So if it's a beautiful space and it works for the plants, but if you look at it from an efficiency perspective, it's kind of a really bad idea.
Okay.
And so what we do is we recognize that, and we try to find the efficiencies up there where we can while maintaining its historic stature. But as we have built onto the campus, we built Tropical Forest Conservatory. It's doing the same thing, growing exotic plants, but it's doing it way, way, way more efficiently because of thoughtful design and technology.
It's a newer addition.
A new addition that takes into account, we're not trying to we're not trying to conquer Mother Nature.
Right.
We're trying to use the natural capital that shines on us, that blows by us.
Right.
Use that to design in a smarter way, so that we can still have these awesome spaces that connect people, but they do it with nature, not in opposition to.
So just to build on that, like the history of the place, right? So when you come here on the Phipps campus, and I never thought about it this way till we just kind of introduced this, is there's an evolution of building design and history in terms of its integration with nature, right? So like the original Phipps campus and Phipps's idea at the time to create that respite, that was the best of the time, right? And then talk about like that evolution and where we're at now. Yeah,
it's a great question. It's really cool because I like to, you know, you walk into Palm Court and that pretty much looks like what it looked like in 1893. So you're walking into...
I'm visualizing. Gary has a drone. He's coming through the door.
The door's open. You have this, you know, these palm trees and this brick wall with and the big stone plaque that says 1892. And so you walk into a time capsule. You know, you're walking into the Victorian period there.
Right.
And so
I should
generations,
have a top hat, like a long beard.
Spats, the whole thing, the whole thing. And generations of Pittsburghers have done this. That's the other thing that's cool. We've been around since 1893, so you know, people come with their grandparents. I came here when I was 5. And so you have this legacy of this being here. You walk in, and it's this tradition. You see it, it's beautiful, And exactly like you said, the farther you go back in the campus to where we are now, we're at the very back of the campus. This building's 10 years old. The nature lab is a couple years after that, and then the newest building, a renovation of the exhibit staging center. This is the future. This is how we're going to.
We're
build.
stepping into the future.
Yeah, and we're still doing the same. The essence has remained the same. It's connecting people to nature, but how we think about it and how we go about doing it, how we build, how we operate, how we talk about it, the whole mindset behind it has basically done a 180.
Was there, there's also like periods through that time in the last, like you mentioned, this is 10 years, but probably it's been about maybe 15-year, 20-year period. So there was a hiatus. You talked about like that lost the connection to nature. There was a bit of a hiatus in that mid 20th century. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say.
And then you come into like the 1990s, 2000s, there's a growing recognition. And then when you look at the campus now, it really literally, like you said, kind of takes off.
Yeah.
What kind of led to that?
Yeah, so I think for Phipps specifically, I think it was a specific moment.
Okay.
So when there was a sea change. And so Richard, our CEO, Richard Piacentini, he came in 93 or 94, or early mid-90s. So we used to be run by the city of Pittsburgh from 1893 to 1993. And then we spun off as an independent nonprofit. And so Richard came on board. And
right around 93, 94.
94, I think, 95, somewhere in there. And so, the zoo, the aviary, us, we were all part of the city. And then after steel collapsed, there was a lot of deferred maintenance, things that just weren't real high priority to take care of this glass house with all the other issues going on in Pittsburgh.
There's financial challenges at the city.
It was a lot.
There's the loss of population.
So,
there's all these dominoes that fall.
And as much as we love it here, we weren't real high on the priority list, understandably. And so we spun off to this nonprofit, but Richard and this nonprofit inherited this building that wasn't in the best shape. And so they quickly decided, and the board decided, we need this master plan to really turn this place around. And we got to stay solvent, and we got to make this place. It's kind of sink or swim, And so there was this audacious plan for this multi-year, multi-phase expansion. And I wish I could say, it was because we wanted to be green. Because it wasn't.
It's survival.
We just needed to stay afloat. We wanted a gift shop so we could sell stuff. We wanted a cafe so we could, sell pop for 400% margin. We needed revenue streams. And so it was in that master plan process where, okay, we're going to do the Welcome Center first. And Bill McDonough was Cradle to Cradle fame, was an early proponent of green building. He was a consultant on the project.
Okay.
And he comes in and says, you're a garden, and so you should build a green building. And this was before that was a green meant green. And that's I think what we thought. Like, well,
you're calling Sherwin-Williams. You're getting some green paint.
And it really wasn't until that design process that Phipps as an entity and Richard made the connection that getting materials to build something that takes a lot of energy and water. Running a building takes a lot of energy and water. For 100 years now, we've been telling people you should care about plants. You should care about nature. But the way we were operating didn't reflect that ethos. And it was this real shift where it was like, this is how we're going to do stuff from now on. And it was because of that building project. And it's been an evolution. We've learned along that way. But that was the real impetus to say,
interesting.
We're not walking the talk here. We're saying you should care about nature. But this building, this is not great for the natural world that's around it. So how can we build? And at first it started with the Welcome Center. How do we build that more efficiently? And then it got into, well, how do we operate everything else? What do we sell in the cafe? What do we sell in the gift shop? How do we grow plants? And so that's where it, not just the built environment, but the entire culture started to shift.
That's fascinating. So like the question of, goes back to like going into survival mode. There's a lot of metaphors here for sustainability and the natural environment, right? Like, the organization has to go into survival mode in order to kind of keep we'll call it the Phipps vision alive. You create this master plan and strategy, but the idea of building more sustainably, like coming from a construction company, like we're constantly wrestling with this in terms of how do you build more sustainably? How do you kind of interact with your client? What was that process like? What were some of those tough choices that you guys had to make in terms of both advancing the mission, but also dealing with the reality.
Sure. Well, the mission changed.
That helps.
Yeah, so it was this realization, and I think back then, the Welcome Center opened, I think, 2005. So this was the first LEED certified Welcome Center in a public garden. And so we were...
So you use a standard LEED.
Yeah, so we used LEED back then, which was new to us. It wasn't sort of nearly as well known as it is now. And so we used that standard as this sort of guiding star, but it was all new to us. And I think back then it was, okay, I have this building, but no, I want to do it green. So you think of that after and you add on, it starts racking these costs up. And well, green's too expensive to do. But I think we started off, this is the right way. This is how we're going to do it. And then they made the math work. And then you realize as the buildings go on to this, the Welcome Center, then Tropical Forest, then this building, you start to realize that the financial case makes a lot more sense to do it this way.
Interesting.
Which at first, you think all these upfront costs, but if you look at, Phipps has already been open 100 years.
Right.
Richard wants to leave here knowing that it's going to be 100 years after he's gone.
Right.
So we're making all these decisions based on
institutional decisions.
Yeah, that this is the way, this is how it's going to last.
Right.
And so it really became this, when people say like, well, green's too expensive, that if you look at the life of a building and if you look at the long term, it's way, way, way cheaper. But
from a life cycle cost perspective.
Right. And so, I think that was a big part of it, is just understanding like, we're a public garden. Our mission is to, once this all started, we added to advance sustainability and human health and wellness. And so part of our mission was making sure that we were doing things that were good for people.
Yeah.
And so if it's part of your mission, it's built into the culture and just how things are done.
It's amazing. A couple weeks ago, our CEO of S&B USA Construction, Peter McKenna, was just talking about exactly this, the responsibility that we have as infrastructure builders or owners, and what that means to society. It was like a really kind of a profound kind of line. I mean, you guys have discovered that at Phipps, because like if you're building something, like building it to last, you don't want to build it haphazardly, that it falls apart. You don't want to build it with materials that are unsustainable or might crumble.
Right.
So that selection mindset, how is that permeated from like that 95 plan into the mid 2000s to today? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think what we talk about now when we think about projects and everything is through what we call, what's called the regenerative kind of frame.
That's next level.
Yeah, so you talk about there's different paradigms, and this is big. We talk about this a lot at Phipps.
This is like water cooler talk.
Yeah, this is just what we do. This is like you come to Phipps and just
be
chat
ready
about
for
regeneration.
it.
And so this idea of like there's extractive, where you just take stuff out of the earth, and that's the industrial evolution, and then you do better. So okay, well, I'm going to recycle this plastic water bottle, so that's not as bad.
Step in the right direction.
Yeah, and then you get sustainable, which is not getting worse. But you move on to this idea of this regenerative frame, where this active construction, this active design, can actually improve the health of what's on it. So where we're sitting here 10 years ago, bereft of any life, paved over, polluted, brownfield. And so
this used to be a public works garage.
Garage.
I'm pointing over here.
Yeah. So if all this runoff came down, polluted Panther Hollow Lake down there, it was ecologically bad. Right. But this project didn't come in and say, well, it's going to be a little less polluted. It actually was done in a way and designed in a way, understanding that its connection to the ecosystem and around it, that this project improved the ecosystem services and restored those, regenerated that, so that now those ecosystem services are being provided again. We have habitat, we have monarch butterfly larvae on our milkweed out there to help them on their way. We have all kinds of wildlife. We have all the water that falls on the site stays here.
Because you're using it on site.
We're using it on site. It either infiltrates into the ground or we clean it and reuse it. So we're not sending any water to the combined sewer system.
Right.
We're carbon neutral. The sunlight is heating and cooling the buildings. And so it's this idea that what if an act of construction could actually make the world a better place? And so, it's a fascinating thing to think about.
Right.
And what's really cool, I guess it's a two-edged sword here. What's really cool is you can do it. We did it. Anyone can do this.
Yeah.
We're in a mid-sized, former industrial, Rust Belt city. You don't have to be in San Francisco with an architect from Berlin who's the only person in the world that can do this. Like, everyone that built this building, everyone that designed this building is from here.
Well, that's something interesting too. I mean, we talked a second ago about LEED, the certification process, and you introduced regenerative building practices. This is a part of the Living Building Challenge.
It is.
As well as WELL. Is that correct? There's a couple. There's a punch list here, right?
Okay. LEED. This building, LEED Platinum, Sustainable Sites Initiative, Sites Platinum.
I see this is like the Steelers trophy.
I know it's that's Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Right? We just love to amass lots of
keep going. I'm sorry.
Lots of gold, lots of hardware. Fitwell, WELL, BREEAM.
Okay.
And Living Building Challenge.
Living Building.
And if I'm forgetting one, I could be forgetting.
They'll catch you at the water cooler.
Yeah. And so a lot of certifications. Not because we want to say look at all our certifications, but because we wanted to understand where the intersections of those were, and does it make sense to do? We just said let's do them all, so we understand.
Just to cover all your bases.
Yeah, and so that's holding us to the highest standard because it's all of them, and then it helped us understand as we do more projects, and people come to us and say, how did you do this? And we can say,
right.
For you, this one really makes sense. Or
the one that I really enjoy is the living. I mean, they're all great.
Yeah.
I don't want to undercut any of them, but the area of focus I'm really interested in is the the Living Buildings certification.
Yeah.
Predominantly the product attraction.
Yeah.
You have to be within a 500-mile radius.
500-mile radius, and there's iterations that have changed. So I'm not sure if this latest version is that, but yeah, I believe there's a distance requirement.
Right. And what's interesting about that to me is that what that starts to do is permeate the sustainability process out, right? Because you have to build those supply chains for those products that go into the building, correct? And was that a challenge?
That was the hardest part of the Living Building Challenge, and it's really, only maybe 30 projects in the world have achieved it.
Wow.
So Frick Environmental
2 here
Center,
in Pittsburgh.
2 in Pittsburgh, actually 3.
3.
ESC was just certified.
Wow.
So we have 2 on one campus. Ideally, we might have 3. We're looking at the nature lab, but
that trophy case just keeps getting we need to expand it.
But we want to make sure, Frick Environmental Center. We're going to call out our neighbors. So it's a big accomplishment for Pittsburgh.
Right.
And it's not easy, as you can tell by the number of buildings worldwide that have gotten it. But the hardest part of it was the materials piece.
Right.
So you have to manage all your own water. You have to be net zero energy. There's different pedals and imperatives, but the materials pedal, so it's, there's a distance component, and then there's a red list. A red list you can't have, and it's chemicals with 48 letters in it that you don't know.
You can't pronounce.
Or it's PVC. You know what I mean? And this stuff's ubiquitous in everything, and so that just sourcing materials
is a challenge.
And it's an advocacy tool too. The Living Building Challenge is about advocating for it. So you have to write letters to these, say, hey, what's in your product? And they either tell you and the bad stuff's in it.
Right.
Or they say it's proprietary, I can't tell you that, and you can't use it. Or they say, the scariest one is,
we don't know.
I don't know. You're breathing.
And if you don't know, then I don't know. Yeah.
And you're thinking of the people in the factories making this stuff,
wow.
And so it becomes an environmental equity and justice piece too. But you got to. And if they don't make the product, you have to write a letter to them and tell them why this is bad. And so it becomes this advocacy piece. And 10 years ago when we were doing this, it was even harder because, the demand for it wasn't like it is now. It's not easy now.
But it continues
But it's growing. I think it was like apples. Like growing up, if I wanted organic apples,
couldn't find them.
I wasn't going to Giant
you grew
Eagle.
them yourself, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or you went to the farm,
Right.
maybe where I'm from. But and now you go to Walmart and they have organic apples because the market demanded it.
Maybe to go back to that, I guess two things are just to work on wrapping up here for a second. But like, one, tie this back into interpretation. Like the idea that you have this living laboratory in effect. How are you guys using the center to engage the public and be that messenger that these things are not only possible?
Yeah.
That's kind of one piece, but the second piece, what's it like working here?
Yeah.
I mean, physically, like if you could talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So how do you convey all this, right?
Right.
Like that's my job, and it's. If you have any ideas, let me know.
Distill it to a 30-minute podcast. That's one way to do it.
Because it's not easy, but I think the real benefit of Phipps is everyone loves beauty, right? This place resonates with you no matter what. For whatever reason you came, someone dragged you for their birthday, and I don't like plants, but
right.
Or I had to go to a wedding here.
Yeah.
You walk in here, it doesn't matter.
It's
you
a beautiful
feel good.
Space.
You feel good, and everyone wants to feel good, and everyone
Right.
wants their family to feel good.
Uh-huh.
And so we're really lucky because the horticulture staff is so good that they make this place feel like it's a Garden of Eden, right? So people come in, and that primes them, and it's like, okay, I feel good, and that makes them more receptive, we think, to some of this messaging. But you don't want to hit them over the head. You don't want to, walk in, wow, this is beautiful, and say, well, how bad the climate is.
Right.
So it's a balance of understanding, helping them understand that this is all part of us, but there are actions we can take to make sure this remains. So, for example, we have the Green Mountain Energy Make the Switch drive, where it was that thing. People come here, they're engaged, it's great. To what end, though? They get in their car, they go home, life happens, I got the bills to pay, I got to get the kids to school. So we thought, what can we do? Because there's something we can have people do when they're here, when they're engaged, that's like an entree into this like behavioral change.
Yeah.
And what's something that would be effective and a seemingly high barrier. But so we realized that in Pennsylvania, there's power choice. So you can choose, you can tell your utility
power switch.
That's exactly right. You can tell them who you want them to purchase their power from, and you can specify you want renewable.
Yeah.
And so we partnered with a company that tables here, and you come in, you say, yeah, I want to. That makes sense. I want to switch. I want no more fossil fuels, to heat my house. I want to switch to green power. So that's great. They do it, and then they get a membership, a free membership to Phipps, a year if they're new members, or a 6-month extension if they're already members. Which you did this. It's done. I don't have to keep doing it. But wow, I feel good. I just
made a
took
step in the right
action.
direction.
I just took this action, and this is going to keep happening. And actually, the people that had done it reached out. We got enough push, like people reaching out after saying, I did this. It's first step, and I want to do more. And what more can I do? So we made this list of like, here are some other things you can do. And so I think it's such a magical space that you want to capitalize on that when they're here, and giving something tangible to make a change when you're here, I think is one way that then, okay, I'm on my way now. That's my first step.
It's a gift that you give to the patrons.
And then they're members, and so they come here more.
Right.
And so that furthers the engagement. It's like the snowball effect, where the more they come, the more they're into it.
And just to finish up, like as an employee and being here every day, because people are typically interacting with Phipps as a visitor, right, or it's a special event. But you all that work here, I don't want people to kind of bang down the doors and like, hang out here all the time in your office. But like, what is that as an office environment?
Yeah,
like?
No, it's so the culture here is everyone's bought into this. Phipps as an institution has been kind of established this culture for the past 15, 20 years. So it's cool because that everyone's sort of on the same page.
Right.
Just as an institutional culture, it's nice. But it's work. So, my Monday was terrible. I had a terrible Monday. I was stressed out. I had all these emails. I was missing deadlines. And so but I stand up.
Yeah.
I walk away from my desk and I walk through the conservatory for 5 minutes.
Boom.
You know what? This is pretty good. You know? And so, just being this close to nature and feeling like you're immersed in it and connected to it.
It cleanses the soul.
It really does. It sounds like a soundbite, but it does. And not to brag, we have a yoga studio, we have a meditation room. So it's pretty,
all right, you're bragging. All right, slow down.
Yeah. But it's still work.
It's still work.
Yeah. But it is.
That's amazing. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here with us on the Green Voice podcast. Thanks for giving us the dirt, literally in a place that has dirt.
Yeah.
So that's super special. Adam, thanks for being a guest, and we look forward to talking with you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming, and happy to have you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Hey, listeners, while we were wrapping up, finishing up there with Adam, we ran into a patron and a great friend, patron of Phipps, but a great friend of mine, Georgia Petropoulos from the Oakland Business Improvement District. So I figured pull her in to the Green Voice podcast and see if we can get a little bit about the pulse of Oakland beyond Phipps, which there's so much going on. So super excited to bring this episode here to you today. Georgia.
Grant.
How have you been?
I have to say, I couldn't have thought of a better place to literally run into you than Phipps Conservatory.
This is so exciting.
On this gorgeous sunny day. I think we brought the sunshine, right?
You brought the sunshine, for sure. It's been a long time.
Yes, it has.
Always good to see you. But I was talking to the guys here at the Green Voice, and I said, we got to get Georgia on this episode since she's here and take advantage of the opportunity.
I'm delighted. I'm excited. Thank you. This is wonderful.
So there's a lot to go through. There's a lot to catch up on.
Right.
Maybe first, talk a little bit about yourself and your role as the executive director of OBID. And I already used an acronym, but the Oakland Business Improvement District. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what is OBID?
Yes, absolutely. So, and again, Grant, it was wonderful to see you. I can't tell you. You have made my kickoff to the holiday weekend.
This is it.
Grant and I go way back, by the way, and all the time we're very focused on place. We're very focused on moving our communities forward. So my role really is engaging and leading amazing partners and people and getting them excited, pushing empowerment for, again, really place and people. That's what matters, right? So in my career, I started in architecture because I love art, I love design, I love place, I love nature, and how can we make sure that we're creating places that reinforce what people need? It all for me came back to people. So lo and behold, starting there and then learning about this industry, economic development. When I first heard about it, we used to call it business district management. We used to call it community development, economic development, all these terms. But what it came down to was people focused on transforming place for the purpose of making it better for people. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I need to shift industry here. And it was a beautiful shift, and it was fantastic. So when you and I first met,
you were in the north side.
That's right. I started there managing business districts on the north side, and what a great place, great people. I learned so much. And then, the opportunity came up for Oakland. And, the other thing is, too, business improvement districts. Wow, what's that?
What's that?
And, as an architect, we're trained and we learned about buildings and how buildings were built and how places were made, going back to the ancients. So I'm gonna put a plug for my people.
Do it.
The ancient Greeks. So we learn,
ancient Greeks' new place.
We learn about the Agora, we learn about the Parthenon, we learn about these things. But you know what they didn't teach us? They didn't teach us about the bids that were there 2,000 years ago.
There was bids in ancient Greece?
Someone had to manage that space. Who's going to hang out in the Agora and talk philosophy? Really? Come on.
The original bid, the OG.
There was definitely a bid in ancient Greece. And so, but no, you don't hear about that part. You hear about the building, the beauty, the new, the shiny. But then, when that's done, you've got a place. So how now do you make sure it continues to be safe, clean, attractive, beautiful, How do you make sure there's amenities and activities that people want to be there for, right? Of course they want to be in a place that's beautiful, but you
have to curate it.
You got to curate it, absolutely. And really that's what bids are place management organizations. That's kind of how the term is today.
Interesting.
And they are always located in the backyard of places that have very high foot traffic, aka downtowns. So it's no surprise that the two downtowns of Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh and Oakland, have a business improvement district.
Talk a little bit about the structure, because I always find bids fascinating. I didn't know that the ancient Greeks created it.
That's right. See, I'll tell you. First on this podcast.
First on this podcast, breaking news, 2,000 years old. But when the Greeks thought of this, or policymakers in Harrisburg that stole their idea, what is that structure?
Yeah. So the structure credit actually has to go to the Canadians. We've got to give the Canadians some love.
All right, we go up north.
The first business improvement district, I believe, was in Toronto in the 1970s, I think. And so it's actually based on a for-profit model. So when you're a tenant and you lease a space in a mall, you pay for the space of which you're going to have your goods and your services, right? But then you also pay a fee, because there's that area called the public space. There's events, there's landscaping, there's flower baskets. That's right. That area in the mall that you walk through is attractive. It's got lighting, it's got landscaping, it's got security, it's got kiosks, it's got events. Someone pays for that. So in the case of a mall, you sign a lease, and so there's a guarantee that that fee is going to come through in order to be able to make sure the public space feeds into what the retailers and the restaurants need.
Interesting.
So in areas like downtowns, you definitely have a public domain.
For sure. Streets, sidewalks.
Right, but you've got multiple property owners. So the first and foremost is the property owners, the stakeholders, and the business owners have to want this to be in place, and then legislation has to follow, so that you can make sure there's a provision of income to be able to provide the services.
Got it. So that to help curate and
take care and maintain because that's the front door.
Right.
Look, there are businesses who can be placed anywhere on any place, and because of their product, people will flock to it.
Right.
But that's rare.
But
right?
It's interesting too, and Oakland's such a great example of this, as being so dynamic.
Yes.
So many things in terms of traffic and flow of people and students and businesses and researchers, and how do you help shape for the needs of those dynamic populations?
That's right. And we really are on the cusp of these are the new downtowns.
Yeah.
Right. And they're formed different. These aren't skyscrapers. Well, actually, I take that back, everybody. Come into Oakland, we are actually building skyscrapers. It's amazing. But traditionally, these are campuses, right? University systems, hospital systems. We're part of what we used to call, and we still call, campuses.
Right.
So there's this urban center, basically almost the glue connecting all of the campuses. You have to begin with who manages all the individual properties,
right? And
what do they need?
Hundreds of properties.
Hundreds of properties, and all manners of properties, right? It's not just spaces for commercial use. It's places people come to work, places people come to live. People come to heal.
Yeah.
People come to get inspired.
Right.
Phipps Conservatory, everybody. If you need a little inspiration, you got to come down where Grant and I are right now. So all of these leaders and all of these, owners and representatives are key to the success of the OBID.
And so, you're in the business, literally, of managing those relationships,
it's 99% of what we do, right, is the managing the relationships, and also empowering and inspiring and also feeding back.
Right.
I was just on a call right now with a property owner, and we laugh because when I get agencies calling me about, hey, can you give me some data about what's happening in the business district? I'm like, first thing I'll do is call the business owners. Okay. They're the pulse
of what's happening.
Right? And my business community, my business owners are very innovative. They have to be they can't be behind the curve. They have to be ahead of it, because every 4 months their population changes.
That's interesting. We've obviously, and there's lots of talk about downtowns. I'm gonna ask you a tough question. I told you I wouldn't, but I am, because now you got my juices flowing and I'm thinking about this. Downtowns have had a huge challenge because of the pandemic. Right. You were at the forefront of doing some really exciting stuff in terms of not just keeping Oakland buoyant during the pandemic, but continue to introduce life onto the streets and activities, and that has continued after the pandemic.
Yeah.
What are some of the, both like your thought process through that, but then also coming out on the other end, what are some of the things that are surviving as a result, some of that innovation that you created?
That's right. It was a catastrophe. 2020.
Yeah.
Well, we don't need to go back into what it was, but silver lining to everything.
Yeah.
So yes, do you remember the time when we didn't even know what this virus was?
For sure.
People were afraid, and actually there was a mandate that retail and restaurants had to be closed, and I believe actually restaurants, you were allowed to sort of pick your products up, but you weren't allowed to actually be in the establishment. Well, oh my goodness, well, how do you do this? How do you survive a business without having customers? So, in the backyard of Oakland, yes, when the universities sort of also had to continue to have their class and office remote, let's not forget the hospitals were 24/7 moving, and Oakland's the heart of hospital systems. So, but we still had to figure out, well, how do we create a place that the customers are going to feel, well, I'm safe, I'm outside, I'm following the rules of the CDC, but yet I can still purchase product.
Right.
So yeah, I saw what was happening in France and what was actually happening in China.
Okay.
The business communities there were starting to just take over the sidewalks and streets. So, lo and behold, went to our city leaders, went to my Oakland leaders, and I said, okay, it's time. We got to not only take over the sidewalks, we got to take over some of these streets. Actually, we closed off a street. We closed off Oakland Avenue.
Oakland Avenue, that's it.
For 2 years, it was a pedestrian-only environment, and that led to continued parking lanes being taken over. Not just here; it was happening all around Pittsburgh. But it was it helped at the moment that was needed. But then we also saw when you build it, they come.
Yes.
The business community was like, Georgia.
This is awesome.
When are we going to get these tables and chairs back? When are we get these places back? And there might have been a time where taking over a parking space would have been a little bit more of a challenging conversation,
for sure.
right? Especially in Oakland, which is it's a dense downtown. You know, it's the opposite.
Do you see like that movement into the public realm and the open space continuing now?
Absolutely.
And more demand for it?
Absolutely. Not just in Pittsburgh. I mean, so our industry, the industry of business improvement districts, place management organizations, city governments, we're all trying to rethink, okay, now's the time. We learned from the pandemic that place matters. We learned that actually, even in climates that half the time remain cold, people still love to be outside. People still want to be able to engage.
And that's fabulous too, because we're here at Phipps and we were talking about this a little earlier, the idea of connecting with nature in the built environment and how important that is from a sustainability perspective. You guys are facilitating that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and where Oakland definitely, it's so dense, and some of its sidewalks some have some width to it and they're generous, others can be very narrow. And so we're trying to figure out, first of all, how do you fit and make sure you've got comfortable outdoor environments for the large populations. But you're absolutely right. Now, how do you make them a place that people want to be in, people want to remain in, and not just move through? So we do have outdoor seating, but we also had to add landscaping. We had to add floral as much as we can. A lot of this right now is temporary. The other positive that came out is now Oakland leaders are talking about, okay, we're ready. We are ready to rethink. We need to rethink some of the way these streets have been used for the past century.
Now that's interesting because you guys are also at the epicenter of some, I'm going to call them, not that that's not a big move, those were big moves, but like some other big moves in Oakland, like the Oakland Plan, bus rapid transit. What are some of the things that are coming as a result of that?
Yeah, so where we can, our organization also supports, there's, as you know, policy also has a big impact on place, right? It's managing it at the moment, but it's also planning. So, we're lucky that we have a bus rapid transit system that's going to be built in Pittsburgh, and the big piece of that was
BRT by the PRT.
That's right, the BRT by the PRT. Give a shout out to the PRT.
That's it.
Pittsburgh Regional Transit. All along, the narrative of that was connect the two employment centers, Oakland downtown, right? So I believe the downtown piece is step one, and then the Oakland piece is going to be coming. So we're going to be seeing dedicated bus lanes. We're going to be seeing a dedicated cycle track, 2-lane cycle track. We're hoping for we're going to be seeing some new shelters with improved amenities. So huge transformation. Bike lanes, also many bike lanes coming through Oakland currently, and again, even with that contraflow lane on Fifth Avenue right now that has a bus, the BRT system, that's actually going to turn into a double track lane for cycling.
Wow.
Yes.
So all along Fifth Avenue.
That's right.
Will be a 2-lane cycle
That's
track.
right. Where right now is a contraflow.
This
Until
is
we
the
get
international sign for 2-lane cycle track.
Right. I think it's like spanning from Craft to, I believe, Bigelow. I could be wrong. Yeah. And then we'll see some parking. But yes, big change.
It goes to fit. It fits into kind of the build it and they will come kind of mantra that you're just talking about. Like as you build that infrastructure, whether it is the outdoor dining or transit amenities or the bike lanes, have you seen that type of adoption take place? Like so people using the outdoor restaurants or like what's that growth look like?
Yes, very much so. I mean, right now I have a business owner, because of the outdoor seating, they actually not only doubled their income, they increased their staff by 2/3 to accommodate all of the outdoor seating and all the outdoor presence.
Wow.
Right? Yes. I mean, so it translates into economics.
Yeah, it's
right?
economic
Ultimately,
development.
it absolutely is. But but we knew this. We knew this in our place. Grant and I completely. That's why we do what we do. We clearly understand that place matters.
Yep.
Place matters for people. Place matters for economics. So the continuation of seeing how we can fit more is now the next challenge, right?
Because you have residential development that's
right.
happening
We have,
in addition to the commercial.
We have office development underway. We have residential development underway. I mean, and by the way, Oakland is the heart of Pittsburgh's Innovation District.
Right.
So we've got University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, in the top 10 in terms of the amount of federal grant dollars for research. That's translating into enormous investment in terms of creating businesses, creating jobs. We need a place that can actually respond and continue to feed to that. This feeds back into the region. So, as this growth continues, towers bring people. Right.
Bodies.
So, absolutely. So you have to have a space that can accommodate that. But at the same time, we also understand people need to get to Oakland, and there's different modes. We talked about that: bus, traffic, cycling,
advancement of electric vehicles,
walking.
and buses.
That's right.
These are all new things.
These are all fantastic, and they should continue. And
one of the things too, it makes me think about, the idea, like the Green Building Alliance has the 2030 district, which Oakland is like a major component of the square footage. So it's not just the transportation system, but it's also the physical buildings themselves. How does that kind of interplay in terms of design and energy and those sorts of aspects?
And again, shout out to our partners, the Green Building Alliance, right? And I know you were a big help as well, both of us, sort of in terms of how do we, when the idea came forward that, hey, Pittsburgh is now going to join the ranks of cities around the world, right? In terms of how we're going to reduce carbon emission. And kudos to GBA, Green Building Alliance, and to Oakland property owners. By the way, both university, hospital, nonprofit, but also for-profit. That now, we're seeing LEED certified is just a minimum standard, right?
Wow.
If they can exceed that, that's great, but we're seeing people that are reaching those even as a minimum standard. I believe, I saw the report earlier this year from GBA that it's not just Oakland. I think Oakland downtown and some other sections of the region that are part of this district. But we've reached almost 50%, I think, of the goals of reaching zero carbon emission. And again, this is about contributing to the global push for this. And
Oakland's part.
We are, big part of it. But I remember the days when we were just beginning to even reach out to property owners. This was a brand new concept. It wasn't something really that was people understood, and our backyard jumped. They were like, tell us, how can we do this?
That's interesting. Maybe a couple of things just as we wrap up. Like one, I'm always interested in terms of what are some of the things that are coming around the corner, for you and OBID. What are some of the things that you're working on with your local council districts and those sorts of things? But what's the next steps? I mean, Oakland's a dynamic place, as we've said.
I know.
It's exciting that it's such a leader in all these issues of sustainability. But What's around the corner?
Yeah, so I'll give it real quick. So you mentioned the Oakland plan. So, and again, shout out to the city. That was organized by the city of Pittsburgh. It was a 3-year process.
My friends in city planning.
Yep, city planning. Many stakeholders of Oakland were involved, including myself. So we did it. We came out with a 10-year plan on how we're going to move Oakland forward, how we're going to move this downtown district forward. Sustainability is a big piece, many goals around that. So folks should go check it out on the website, get more information on that. So yeah, let's talk about another big policy coming forward, and kudos to Councilperson Erica Strausberger, one of our 3 Oakland council members. We have a new policy, right? We're banning plastic bags. We are banning plastic bags. Our business community is ready. They're going to get ready. Lucky for us, in our backyard, we have a large student population that are probably going to be the consumers that are clapping away and like,
bringing their own bag.
That's right, bringing their own bag. So, but again, kudos to Erica Strausberger, because that was her push to make that happen. And I'm excited, and Oakland's going to lead on that. But again, even going back to this infrastructure piece, where we are looking and hoping that we can start getting some sort of bigger picture designs and some ideas about, all right, let's think about these quote unquote sidewalks, streets, places, open spaces. How now do they begin to continue the post-pandemic? We know we need it. We know it has to move forward. How can we rethink this? It's been a century, right? Nobody said we can't
redo it.
Think something different.
That's amazing. Georgia, thank you so much for running into us.
I know. I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did.
Thanks for being a guest here on the Green Voice podcast. We'd love to have you back, and maybe next time we do like a walking tour.
That would be great.
I think that would be fun.
Wonderful. Or even on bikes.
Or on bikes. I'm happy to do that. So thanks for being here, sharing a little bit about the dynamic nature of what is Oakland. And we'll be catching up with you soon.
Thank you, Grant. Awesome. It's my honor.
Thank you. Thanks again for listening in to the Green Voice. It's great to have you here with us, and great to be in Oakland, and great to have Georgia with us. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.